Yeah, hi. Hello, nice to meet you all. Yeah, thanks for tuning. Thanks, Cici, for the wonderful introduction. So first of all, I'm just very excited to be here. I think I have nothing but love and respect for the founders. They're behind the scenes, Ling and Iskandar, and just a dedicated team that's put this event together. So I'm just very excited and honored to be sharing with you today. A lot of things happening behind the scenes, so do consider donating as well to this amazing cause. But I'm here today to just share my story with you very vulnerably, very authentically. And some of the lessons, some of the insights that I've gained are from it. Whether you're a youth or you're a parent listening to this, I do hope that you have gained something that can help you to more insight into your own mental wellness and also help people around you as well. Okay, so just let me begin. Just a brief check. Do I look at Cam 2? Cam 2, right? Okay. Yeah, cool. Yeah. Sure. Thank you. Yeah. So I guess I'll just start sharing my story with you all. So I think it started when my first kind of touch with mental health started when I was 14 years old. I have a brother who was 12 years old at that time. I remember a couple of months before the PSLE, right? You have a friend that was jovial, right? He's happy, he's just full of energy, always came to my home and I just smile every time I see him. The couple of months before the PSLE, I stopped seeing him. The next time I saw him, he was huddled in the corner of the toilet. It was PSLE results day. And he was in this position, he said, on his phone. I did badly. My life is over. And I looked at him, right? He's a complete contrast to what I remember him to be. And I asked myself, right, why should a 12-year-old kid feel that his entire life ahead of him is over? Right, just because of a few letters on a piece of paper. Right, to me, I couldn't get the image out of my head because it was such a stark contrast. Now, the irony is that all of us, right, in this culture, to some extent, we are affected by our grades or by results or certain expectations that we have. And I, as well, I was a type A personality. So throughout my schooling life, I remember I was work obsessed, right? I always tried to be the best, competitive. So I did well in my studies, I did well in my sports, and I received a lot of praise from there. Right, Kevin, you're set for life and everything. My self-esteem started to become very dependent on variables, right? Things that vary, like grades, achievements. Back then it was Facebook now, number of likes on Facebook. So that's fine if you're doing well, but that's a very dangerous place to be in because variables can change anytime. And for me, that happened during my JC days. I went to a decent JC and I remember for the first time, everything I did, I always felt inferior to someone else. I always felt I was competing, always feel I'm not good enough. And it drove me really hard. So I remember studying 14 hours a day before my A-levels. I wake up at 10 a.m. and I'll sleep at 12 and repeat. And I remember before the A-levels, right, my mom was sitting opposite me. I'm very close to my mom, right? And she said, like, Kevin, when I was your age or a bit older, I had to take a leave of absence from school because your grandma, right, her mom actually had issues. So she had anxiety and she took a leave of absence from school. I remember I looked at my mom, right, straight in the eye, I looked at her, I said, Mom, that will never happen to me, right, in my arrogance. But life has an interesting way of humbling you. So that happened during my A-levels. I remember I was so anxious, I couldn't sleep. And eventually, I actually handed up blank papers for my math. So if you all know it's a 6-hour paper, paper 1 is 3 hours, paper 2 is 3 hours. Both papers are handed up blank papers. Okay. Of course, now grades mean nothing to me, but back then it was everything. Right? If you are a youth listening to this, you might relate. Like my whole future, my dreams was conditioned in that particular major exam, or at least that was what I was conditioned to believe. Okay, so that was, to cut a long story short, I think that was a really long struggle with my mental health. It was the start of depression, and I struggled for months after that. I wanted to give up my A-levels, but because of my family support, I scraped through it. But immediately after the A-levels, I had to be hospitalized for a while because I just couldn't control my thoughts. I broke down. A couple of months after, it was very, very excruciating as well. But because of professional help, because of parents that were close to me, and because of certain paradigm shifts that I made, complete paradigm shifts that I made, I did eventually overcome it. And even though it was the toughest period of my life, now I consider it the biggest blessing by far. Right? Because if not for that, I would not have the passion, the purpose, the drive that I have today, the empathy. And so, I want to share with you 3 points that I learned from this journey. And the first is that there can be a lot of purpose that comes from pain, right? And your mess can possibly become your message. I've been very fascinated about resilience and mental health, like obsessed about it the moment I overcome. So now I host a podcast and I talk to so many people. I've asked them, like, I'm just a bit patronizing. I ask people, what's your lowest point and how do you overcome, right? But it's really helped me understand that I'd like to invite you as well to just think about it in your own lives. Maybe let's take about 5 seconds, right? Think about what has been that ingredient, what has been that factor that is necessary for your resilience. What has been that factor that no matter across all your struggles, right, it is a necessary factor for your resilience? You take some time to think about it, right? And some of you might say, like, it's hope, right? Friends, support, keeping the end in mind. Now, all these are important, but there's one thing you realize, right, that's common among every single person in resilience. And the answer to that actually lies in the definition of resilience. Right? Resilience is defined as the ability to adapt or bounce back from what? Failure or setbacks. Which means that in order to develop resilience, you must have failure. You must have setback. Right? And that's why I find it so ironic that we stigmatize and we punish failure, when without it, it is impossible to develop resilience. And so I hope to get that, help us get that paradigm shift, right? That failure is not a personal, permanent, pervasive stigma, but it really is a neutral, temporary, and an exciting opportunity for growth. Which leads me to my second point. It leads to growth provided we take small actions and provided we focus on what we can control. Right? Life is not just about what happens to us, but how we choose to respond to it. A quick analogy for you all. In Buddhist teaching, there's 2 arrows, right? The story of the 2 arrows. The first arrow is shot by your enemy, right? For example, you did badly in a test or relationship challenge. Something happened to you. That's the first arrow. The second arrow is your beliefs and thoughts about the first arrow. Right? I don't deserve to be shot. I did so much for this person. How can he do something to me? Right? I studied so hard. I don't think I can ever be good. So the first arrow only happens once. The second arrow happens as many times as you create in your mind. So most of the damage is not done in the second arrow. Most of the damage is not done in the first arrow. It's done in the second arrow. The first arrow we cannot control, we cannot directly control, but the second arrow we can. Now I understand that it's very difficult sometimes, right? In my struggle, there are times where I felt like I had no control. That's what depression does to you. But understand that with certain factors, you can take small steps, right? I got out of my bed. Even if it's a tiny step, I got out of my bed, I went to volunteer, and slowly but surely, by focusing on what I can control, eventually those thoughts receded and I managed to overcome it. Okay, so I hope you choose to focus on what you can control, because it is powerful. And I'd like to end off this point with a quote by Viktor Frankl. He's a psychiatrist in a concentration camp. And he said this. He said that he observed people in the most difficult situations. Even in those situations, he said that they can retain a vestige of spiritual freedom. Right? That between the stimulus and the response, there's a gap. The gap lies our ability to respond, and in our response lies our growth and our freedom. Okay? So choose to focus on that gap. Now, the third and final point I want to share with you all is faith and fear. So after I overcame my depression, I didn't share earlier, but I actually went into mania. So mania, M-A-N-I-A, you can Google it. It is a Mania, M-I-N-I-A, is basically quite a condition. It's rare, but it basically gets you to a very elevated state of arousal, and you are just in this extreme high, right? And you just lose control of reality. You think that you're the savior. So in those moments, right, I did many extreme dangerous acts, and I caused my reputation to be affected. So when I came back to balance, right, I remember that, okay, honestly, I attracted it lah. So I will just read this out to you. This was what people were saying about me. And at that point of time, I think it hurt quite a bit. I'll just read out to you. So this was actually on a confession page. Back then, your school had confession pages where people submit anonymous stuff. So I'll just read this out. Someone actually wrote this anonymously towards me, directed at me. You flunked your A-levels because you hate the system. You have an extremely defeatist attitude and unwilling to work hard. You claim that there are other alternative paths that you can get success. Well, sure, if these methods worked for you, you wouldn't be here making vlogs for a living. So this was just part of the thing that was directed, and it was public, right, so everyone could see it. And I remember I was so affected by it because I wanted to be a speaker. So I went to my mentor, right, and I told him, his name is Hong Ming. I said, Hong Ming, like I'm very afraid. You know, like I really want to be a speaker, I really want to spread awareness, but like there's all these things said about me online. I'm not sure if what I did in the past will affect it. So he looked at me, right, he said, Kevin, very calmly he said, Kevin, why are you letting an imagined future rob you of your present joy? No one knows what's going to happen, right? Don't worry about it, just focus on what you can control. Focus on building your expertise. And one day you look back, you understand that your past becomes a stronger testament rather than a discrediting factor. I left that meeting in tears because I didn't believe him. I didn't believe a single word he said. But I still took action. I took small action. And a couple of years later, last year, I started a podcast and I shared my full story. I got so much feedback. And I knew in my heart of hearts, right, I knew that was the day he was referring to. That finally you understand like why this happened. And I knew it. And I was so emotional because, and I end off with this, right? I was so emotional because he told me not to predict my future in fear. But ironically, in faith, he predicted mine. Understand that faith and fear is not very different from what we think. Both of it refers to a belief in the unseen, right? Differentiated only by how we define the unseen. In fear, we define the worst possible outcome, and in faith, we define the best possible one. And often, the one that you choose can become your reality. So I hope that my sharing today has helped you in some way. If you'd like to connect with me, feel free. On Rebound with Resilience. I'm not sure whether it's in the chat, but just Google it, Rebound with Resilience on Instagram or YouTube. And you can just get more content, I guess, of resilience and mental health. Yeah. So thanks once again for inviting me here, Ling and Iskandar. I really appreciate it. From my heart, I love all of you. Do stay resilient. Wish you all the best. And I'm looking forward to the rest of the session today. Yeah, bye.